Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to a brand new edition of the Lashing Out Podcast on the Nittany Sports Now Network. My name is Jarrod Prugar, and I am back after a brief hiatus for the birth of my son, alongside my good friend and co-host, Kevin Quigley. I do want to give a shout-out to my boy, Mike Asti, for filling in when I was gone. Kevin, well, damn, I missed a lot. Obviously, whiteout nightmare, and only to be usurped by the disastrous Rose Bowl performance for Penn State against UCLA on Saturday afternoon.
Yeah, it's good to have you back. Mike and Austin both did well for us, but I'm happy to not be hosting and terrible transitions to breaks that I was will become known for. But so something that James Franklin is known for is losing, and when you lose a game and then you lose a second game, and it's not that he loses every game. Obviously, that's not the case, but he's losing the big ones. That's been it. And I think I've always been hesitant to talk about losing the big ones because the talent level for Penn State throughout his tenure hasn't been where it's been now. Maybe you could look at 2017 as a rough season. Like that season had a lot of expectations. You win the Big Ten in 2016. 2017, you return most of your people. And you look at that season, you're like, this should be a good year for us. And it turns out to not be. And then this year, you come into it and you return everybody on the offense. Pretty much everybody. I think you might have lost one or two offensive linemen. Your receiver room, which was a disaster, we're starting to see that maybe it wasn't. You turn that completely over. You return your starting quarterback. You return both your star running backs. All of these guys came back with some mission to prove. You lay an egg against the whiteout, and then you fly clean across the country. It's a team that you're favored by 24.5 points to, and you give up 27 points in the first half. Now, you did lose Tony Rojas on Tuesday at practice, probably done for the season, but one guy on the defense does not give up 27 points to UCLA, who was 0-4 coming into this game. Nico looked pedestrian at best prior to this game. Maybe we give credit to Jerry Neuheisel, but they threw that game plan together in 2 days. And if you're Penn State, you came into this season as the third-ranked team in the country. You got as high as number 2. You fall down to number 3, number 4, whatever it was. You're number 7 after you lose to Oregon because, you lost in overtime. Like you're pretty much the same rank as Oregon as you should be. Top 10 team. And UCLA is bottom of the barrel at this point in time. And it's frustrating at this point in time.
Frustrating, I don't even think, scrapes the surface. Listen, there's one thing to lose to Oregon. You lost in double overtime. At home, it is what it is. Dan Lanning, I think, is a great young coach, great young mind in college football. Oregon's a good program, without a doubt. But the problem here is the Rose Bowl is not a place where you haven't been, right? You've played there now twice, I think. Yeah, Franklin has been there twice, if not 3 times, at Penn State. I think twice. Utah and USC, the one because they split. So logistically, this is a place where you've been before. Yeah, those are bowl games. UCLA, and listen, I will tip my cap to Tim Skipper, Jerry Neuheisel, Scott White, the court who for developing that game plan in 2 days, especially on the offensive side of the football, and coming out coaching, out working, and just outplaying Penn State. Penn State didn't want to be there. They were feeling sorry for themselves. And that's not the making of a great team. They're pouting. I don't know what's going on offensively, play calling wise. That's an issue for another day. But, but also playing time wise. I mean, you can't tell me that Tyler Warren was a great player, but you can't tell me that this offense is that much different just without him. You have playmakers that can spread the field. There are a lot of times where Drew Aller, on that one touchdown drive, looked great. Other times, he's looked abysmal. That inconsistency can't happen. But you got outworked as a staff. If I'm them, I'm in the office on Sunday, and I'm thinking, where can we get this better? Because we just got outworked by interim coaches. And that's the embarrassing part. That's the frustrating part. That's why this is rock bottom for Penn State football. Listen, losing to Ohio, great, whatever. Losing to Virginia, it is what it is. Back in the sanction era. Losing to some teams that you probably shouldn't after a big loss, whatever. But this is a team that was the worst Power 4 team in the country. You go out there and listen, I just became a dad last week. I dealt with shit literally hitting my hand, and somehow that was still a better performance than Penn State gave defensively against UCLA. You have the highest paid defensive coordinator in the country, and you let a team that game planned 2 days, not 3, not 4, not 5, 2 days, put up 42 on you. Yeah, were they aggressive? Absolutely. But you didn't spy Nico Iamaleava, and that's my problem. You didn't have a backup plan. How are you that unprepared to not for somebody that goes down? This is James Franklin talks about preparation, right? Next man up. How the hell do you not have a next man up for Tony Rojas? And what the hell are you doing with Dom DeLuca? You know, he's missing gaps. He's not playing sound football. Maybe this defense is a little confusing. It was supposed to be simplified and let the players play, but that doesn't seem to be happening. That's my problem. That's why it's so beyond frustrating. What is the issue? You went out and got Jim Knowles, top coordinator in the game. You went out. You have Andy Kotelnicki, who was supposed to be a top coordinator in the game, and yet you still can't put it together. And then you get embarrassed on the road against UCLA. That's why this is rock bottom. And where do they go from here? And that is a big, nice reflection in the mirror of the Lasch building. What can we do to get back on track?
I think the answer comes from the top. The only problem is the program doesn't have $54 million to spare to buy the guy out. And now, should you be fired for one game? Absolutely not. But this is a pattern and happens year after year. And I texted you this, and I didn't follow through on this, but I said, I'm going to go buy clown makeup and wear it for the duration of this podcast because I'm the fool for believing that this would be different this season. I
had them at 12-0, Kevin. So, I mean,
yeah. You and I both did. And like, here we are probably staring at an 8-4 season. You got to lay an absolute egg against Oregon. And last year against Ohio State, you went up 10-0, but you laid an egg right after that. And it's time after time, this team just clutches it too hard. And that has to come from the top. How do you fly clean across the country? Why do you move Amari Campbell out of middle linebacker? What the backup plan to Tony Rojas is to move your best defensive player. I mean, Rojas was probably the best defensive player this season, but your second best defensive player leading the team in tackles at the middle linebacker position, and your decision to replace your star outside linebacker who's just an athletic freak with a guy who's been holding down the middle of your defense. Nothing about a middle linebacker to me screams 4'3", 230-pound Tasmanian devil at outside linebacker. You castrated two positions of your defense, and let's not even talk about the officiating. I don't think that's not what happened in this game, but James Franklin calling out the officials last week after the Oregon game. Do you think the Big Ten retaliated a little bit? Because that officiating was abysmal. UCLA was 7 of 8 on third down yesterday in the first half, and 2 or 3 of those runs were Nico's scrambles, and the left tackle just was mauling Dennis Sutton all game long. Denai wasn't really trying yesterday. He was just trying to bull rush the left tackle. It wasn't really working. The only way you're going to get holding calls is if you try to get outside of that left tackle's shoulder pads, whether you duck in, whether you duck outside. You can't just bull rush through his chest plate, because if you're getting held all night long, guess what? The ref's not going to see it because you're not making any attempt to show him that you're getting held. And he put a full kick step in before the ball even snapped, and the officials just let it go on a false start. That was the 2nd and 5 play. I think Nico ran it for 52 yards. If not, it's a 2nd and 10. Like, abysmal officiating, so that doesn't help the game, but like, just sloppy. And the defense just wasn't trying. Sure, you have that curveball thrown at you on Tuesday, But UCLA had way more curveballs thrown at them throughout this entire season. And on Thursday, they're able to install this brand new offense. And maybe it's not a brand new offense. So we do have to give credit to Nico. I don't think he's all that spectacular. But it's not like that UCLA offense doesn't have talent. Like, led a team to a playoff in the SEC last year. It means more, so much so that he left it. But that's a really good offense. And it's kind of just a failure from the top down. Like, the James Franklin teams are unprepared. His record after a loss is abysmal. His record coming off of a bye is terrible. Just like his buddy Mike Locksley. Mike Locksley is now 0-10 after a bye. Where do you think Franklin learned bye week preparation from? Probably from Mike Locksley. Guess what they both do on bye weeks? They go out and recruit. Recruiting is important, but also too is preparing for your next opponent. So the next time you hop on that private jet to go to some random high school in Florida or wherever the hell you're going, might as well throw the tape in the plane with you and start watching it and start talking with your coordinators. Write up notes, write up emails, whatever the hell you have to do. But this is just frustrating to me. And here we are, 5 years left in this stupid contract of James Franklin. And it's disgusting. I'm so upset. It's when is enough? Like, how many times does Penn State have to go through this? Like, this is legitimately their best national title chance since 2005? Maybe 94 if you want to go back even further. They haven't won one in 40 years, so we can't say that they're perennial powerhouses winning national titles, and the expectation can't be to win a national title every year. But 40 years, it probably seems like it should be good enough. And when you have a Heisman Trophy caliber quarterback, you have two running backs who are allegedly. You have two running backs who are more than capable of winning the Heisman if one could hit the hole and and shed a tackle every once in a while. And I'm not trying to shit on the players, but just the coaching staff doesn't care. The coaching staff just didn't do anything to prepare them. And the players just come out and look defeated because they know you lose to Oregon. That's it. It's not exactly it, but maybe you sneak in at the 11 or 12 seed, and then you're playing at somebody else's house on a cold night in December, whatever. The loss to Oregon solidified 2 losses in the Big Ten. It solidifies not making the conference title game. It solidifies not getting a top 4 seed in the playoffs. Like, threw a monkey wrench in the entire season. And their response to that was, I'm just going to go lose to UCLA. Like, stupid.
And it's one thing if it was if it was close throughout, but UCLA was up 20. You can't do that to that team. And listen, again, I don't want to disrespect the UCLA coaching staff by all, because I think if there's a coaching staff that deserves any accolades, it is that coaching staff for literally keeping that team wanting to play football, because they had everything working against them. They had three interims, right? Guys are leaving that program left and right, coaching staff wise. Jerry Neuheisel gets promoted. It hasn't even called plays. And this is the issue, right? Like, you're so unprepared going into this game. He forgot to call plays. Like, there were plays because he's not used to it. He comes out and says, I forgot to call plays because I just swiped the headset up. I didn't even call play. Nico, I believe it calls plays. One worked really well. It was a scramble. And then one obviously didn't work. I think it was on 4th down. But again, man, you're so I don't even say what it's not uncharacteristic, because this is what we've seen all year. They haven't been ready to play a game all season, and it bit them in the ass against Oregon. Granted, it was a lot closer, and that game was a lot tougher, but you come out and you go down 10 points early. You're already chasing 2 scores before you even have the ball in a position where you're ready to score. Then you just don't do anything on offense because your scheme and all your schematics are just so blah. Like, you have this high-powered offense, allegedly, and you're getting nothing out of it. You have the weapons. You have a 2-headed monster and running back that would be good. Katron Allen's holding up his end of the bargain. Nicholas Singleton, I don't know what's up with him. But you got to figure it out, because whatever it is isn't working, and that is a major problem with the rest of the season right in front of them.
I was actually happy with the offense. I thought that they actually made good changes. I thought the play calling was a lot better. The execution was a lot better. Drew was 19-26, 73% completion rate. That is better. But the problem is the defense got gashed, and then what was it, last year or 2 years ago? They get burned on the surprise offside kick, on the surprise onside kick. And as UCLA is going to kick off that ball, I saw both DeJuan Lane and the guy inside him. I think it was number 35. I didn't even bother to look his name up because both of them bailed. Both of them are 7-8 yards back down the field, back completely turned to the kickoff coverage before the ball's even kicked. And that was a point of emphasis after they got this. They succumbed to the surprise onside kick. What was it, 2-3 years ago, whatever. That was a point of emphasis of do not leave the 45-yard line until that ball is kicked. And here we are 2 years later. We've just completely forgotten it. And those were the only two people on the entire kickoff coverage who were leaving before. And the only reason UCLA calls that on the first kickoff after a score is because that's 100%er. They know that both of those guys bail out every time. No one else on the front does it. And no one on the coaching staff bothers to look at the tape and say, guys, do not leave the 45-yard line. Do not. I don't care what the kickoff return looks like, because we can fair catch it and get it to the 25 if it really looks that bad. But if you leave that 45-yard line, they drop one right behind you, and then they get another ball, they get the possession, and they get another touchdown, and now all of a sudden you're down 14-0. 2 drives into the game before your offense has even taken a snap. And that just set off the entire first half. They, UCLA just, it took the wind right out of everybody's sails. The defense, I think, what did the defense play time of possession wise in the first half? Time of possession in the first half, 19 minutes and 25 seconds for UCLA. Like, they got gassed and then they got burnt. And credit to the offense. Their first drive of the game, 10 plays, 75 yards. They did the punt. The drive to end the first half was abysmal, just playing scared. Like, we are more worried about UCLA getting this ball back and putting it down our throats again, that after the 2-minute warning, we're going to run 3 plays, turn it over on downs, and then UCLA is going to go kick a 56-yarder to end the half. And guess what? We played scared and we still gave up points. And then in the second half, Luke Reynolds, that bad fumble, man, that just stunk. Like, that was unfortunate. But then the offense answers with 3 straight touchdown drives, 5 plays, 62 yards, and then back-to-back 10 plays, 75-yard drives. Like, I don't have any qualms with the offense. The problem is they did not have the ball. 3 drives in the first half, and one of them's a 4-minute drill. And, like, they got to the 2-minute warning and just like, well, we don't want UCLA to get the ball, so let's try to eat the clock. But you were having success. Like, just go score. Get yourself in a field goal position. And, like, you're playing scared against UCLA? Why are you scared? Go win the game. And they didn't.
Right. And before we go to the second segment, I want to say this. The predictability is not, again, it's very characteristic of a James Franklin team, right? How late in the game, in the 4th and 2 play, which I'm putting above 4th and 5 as that much worse. You're running
it's the same play call.
You're running an east-west play. You're running east-west into the boundary, against a stronger front. Everybody's coming at you. You have an out route or a hitch route probably on the other side of the field, on the far side, far numbers on the field side. But you don't check out of that, right? 4th and 2, you need 2 yards, and you don't have the confidence to get downhill to get more than 2 yards. You want the ball in Drew Allar's hands in that moment, and that's not the person you want it. You want to give that ball to Katron Allen. You want to give that ball in space to Nicholas Singleton. Get 2 yards, extend the game. Then you back it up, end of the game. It's 4th down for UCLA. They're punting, and you know exactly what they're going to do. They're going to run to the back of the end zone and take the safety. You're going to eat up some clock, and then you don't rush anybody. You waste 7, 8, 9 seconds off the clock there. How are you not prepared for that? That's the problem. Preparation is not there. It hasn't been there in any game this season. Now you're 3 and 2. You're unranked in the AP poll, deservedly so, after that awful game. And where do you go from here? And we're going to talk about where we go from here, or where Penn State goes from here, when we come back for the second segment of the Lasching Out Podcast on the Nittany Sports Now Network. Welcome back to the second segment of the Lasching Out Podcast. He's Kevin. I'm Jarrod. Where does Penn State go from here, Kevin? First and foremost, I want to say this on the record. I don't think that James Franklin is getting fired this year. There are 56 million reasons why. They don't have the extra money. All that money is tied up in Beaver Stadium. That's neither here nor there. I don't think that getting rid of him, and in my opinion, is the right move. Yes, you want more, but you mentioned Penn State hasn't won a national championship in 40 years. And while that is unfortunate, and I think the playing field is much more equal than it ever has been, and this is allegedly the most talented team that James Franklin has had, I don't necessarily agree with that, because I saw some of those offensive teams in 2016 and 17 when they had way more talent offensively. They had guys like Chris Godwin, Saquon Barkley, guys like that. Trace McSorley. Trace McSorley was a gutsy guy. He when the game was on the line, that's who you wanted the ball in their hands. Defensively, okay, I can give you that. They still had some studs back then, but the problem is James Franklin isn't going anywhere, and the reason why, obviously, the buyout is there. But again, who you going to go get? And that's the problem, right? The grass isn't always greener. Like right now, they're in this purgatory of, to quote James Franklin, great to elite, if you will. They're in that great type of deal. They're having success year in and year out. They made it to the national semifinal last year, and that's the problem with this year. They made it to the national semifinal last year with a far less talented team than they do this year, and now they've laid two eggs. One runny egg. The Oregon game is a wash. Whatever. That's just a great football game. Could they have done some different things? Yes, but right now, you got to figure this out. You got to figure out where you're going to go from here. Obviously, they're not going to make a quarterback change because God knows what they have behind them. Like, no disrespect to Jackson Smolik or Ethan Grunkemeyer, putting them in this situation isn't any good. It's Drew Aller's squad. You got Keyshawn Allen, Nicholas Singleton. I don't know what the hell they're going to do with them. Maybe figure out how to get these guys open, the running or the receivers open. But defensively, man, you give up a 40 plus points to UCLA. Now, granted, that's not entirely your fault. You're not playing complementary football, but Franklin staying, that I think that's going to be the thing. I don't know that people, obviously, they're over it. You're right. You talk a big game. You're recruiting well. You're winning. You make it to the national semifinal, and then boom, you're just same old Penn State that's losing big games, and then we're back to losing games like they did against UCLA.
At some point, you have to break your talent level. 2016, you're coming out of the sanctions. Your recruiting classes aren't fantastic, but you're able to will a team together. You're able to get them to believe. You get the block 6. You go win a Big Ten title after being down 28-7. I nearly walked out of Lucas Oil Stadium that night because it was that horrendous in the first half. You go to the Rose Bowl, you lose to a Sam Darnold-led squad, but really competitive game. That broke the talent of that team, right? That talent level was at 8th floor, and you broke into the 10th floor, right? You made a jump. This talent level is probably a 5th or 6th ranked team in the country. Maybe even 3rd or 4th in the talent level. Losing Tony Rojas, I think, knocks you down a tier, clearly, because the defense was just lost out there. They've got to be able to trust some guys, and for God's sake, get Dom DeLuca off the field. I know he's a gritty guy, but just he was awful. He regressed a lot last year, and then this year you put him at middle linebacker against UCLA, and he just looks lost out there. The entire defense looks lost. I mean, most of the yards they gave up was on scrambles and just ad-libbed plays or just blatant misholding calls. But you've got to, at some point, take that leap without the top-ranked recruiting class in the country, without that top 5 class. Because the last couple of years, he's been in that 10 to 16 range. And why are you in the 10 to 16 range? It's because you're performing at the 10 to 16 range. Unless you have a season where you perform in that top 5. And you've got to do it really in back-to-back years where if you go top 5 this year, the recruiting class for this year is already there. You have to run that back into a consistent season the next year so that the next group of guys behind them that are not committed yet look and be like, oh, look what they did. I'm a 5-star guy. I can make an impact right away on that team. And I think that team's going to get it to the national title next year. And that's what this season was supposed to be. And you look, they got some recruiting momentum. And if they had solidified the result from last year into this year, then it gets better. The talent level starts to really creep up into that elite, the top 3, the top 4 consistent recruiting classes. But then you go out and you do this. And that's the problem. Is James Franklin going anywhere? No. Am I scared of what would replace James Franklin? Yes. Because you don't know what you're going to get. But when Bill O'Brien left, you didn't know what you were going to get. You got James Franklin. And at some point in time, enough has to be enough. I don't think it's this year. Like you said, $750 million tied up in the Beaver Stadium renovations. Terry Bagula is going to be tapped out. Like, he's not just going to write a check for that amount of money. The Big Ten media thing or the private equity thing, that's coming, but that's got to go. That's going to get dumped into NIL. So they just have to buckle down and, you got to go to Columbus and win.
You got to coach them up. Like, sorry to cut you off, Kevin, but you have to coach them up too. Like, so many guys aren't getting developed. They haven't developed a receiver since Parker Washington, right? Like, it's Liam Clifford. No disrespect to him, but he's making more of an impact on special teams. He had a punt return or punt block, he returned that for a touchdown, which was great. They needed that, right? So that's one less touchdown our offense had to score. But you got to coach them up. They haven't done anything with receivers in years. You have some guys that are allegedly good, but we don't know. I don't think Marcus Higgins makes it after this year. I don't think that I don't think that that's necessarily fair because he inherited it off of Taylor Stubblefield, and David Corley was awful before that. But, like, you have to coach these guys up. I don't know enough about Stan Drayton yet, but it's very clear, I think, that Singleton has regressed. I think Ty Howell does a great job with the tight ends. I think they've done it. I think they've been okay. Drew Aller is Drew Aller. There's nothing different than any other year that we've had for Drew Aller. There are some plays that he looks like a top pick in the NFL draft, and there's some plays that he looks like he could be Mr. Irrelevant. And that we mentioned years past the Sean Clifford experience, right? That pendulum, that inconsistency, and it seems to me like they're trying to be too perfect and too cute, if you will. And a lot of that is in play calling, especially. But they're trying to make the perfect pass or the perfect play. And that you just listen, that's probably the best thing about Brett Favre. Just go out and let it rip. Be a gunslinger. Trust your instincts, trust your mechanics, and just go and play. Don't react. Just play the game. Let the game, take control of it and do your thing. And if you're able to do that, typically that leads to success. But right now, you got to develop. If you're James Franklin, listen, you're still going to get recruiting classes. It's Penn State. People are always going to be beating down the doors to get Penn State. But once they get there, that recruiting ranking does not matter. And I have always said this, once you get on campus, you don't have any stars. You got to earn it, you got to work it, and you got to develop. And that's not always easy. You see what we're seeing at Texas, right? Penn State and Texas are not in the AP top 25. They were the preseason number 1 and 2 teams. Texas and Arch Manning, life isn't always greener, right? Now we're seeing why he wasn't playing over Quinn Ewers. And you see against who he was playing against. Listen, high school football is a different breed in different areas, right? In Pennsylvania, it's pretty competitive for the most part, unless you're in the Whitfield right now where teams are trying to take mercy on each other. And that's a whole different story for another day. But it's not always, one of those situations where you're playing against elite talent every game in and game out. And that's an issue because when you get up there and you're playing 4-star after 5-star after 5-star, it's a little bit harder at the collegiate level. Can you develop? And it's tough to see that development right now. And that's the biggest problem. And a program that has prided itself on development. Who knew about Saquon Barkley before Saquon Barkley was at Penn State, right? He comes to Penn State, becomes a freak, and poof. And you see what he's doing in the NFL. MVP, wins the Super Bowl, those sorts of things. and take those 2, 3, 4 stars and coach them up. And that's why, right now, a lot of it, you're talking NIL, right? And NIL is an issue too, because hey, this guy's getting this much bag, this guy's getting that much bag, and Nico Amaliva was negotiating his NIL deals while Tennessee was in the playoffs, right? He left before the orange and white game or whatever they call it at Tennessee. So I mean, the NIL factor is there too because the money is heavily involved. Coaches are now dealing with that crap, but you have to go out and coach these guys up, prepare them for anything. And you talk about preparation. We do this. We have these routines, right? Want to know. Well, listen, you need to back it up. Your processes need to match that preparation, and you can't treat games differently now. Like, a game against Villanova is a game against Villanova, but you have to go out and handle your business. Yeah, can you go out being vanilla against them? Sure. But you know what? At this point in time, put it on tape. Go out, win football games. That's all you need to do. That's all you have. That's what you have to do moving forward, because another loss, and if it's not to Ohio State, you're playing in the Citrus Bowl.
Maybe it's even the Pop-Tarts Bowl. Who knows?
I would kill for the Pop-Tarts Bowl. I would 100% go if it was that.
Yeah, but like that's what I was talking about. Like you need that talent to break through that glass ceiling, and they're not. Like Drew's double tapping passes, and they showed that one especially on the broadcast. But there were a couple other times where he's double tapping passes, and I played ultimate frisbee in high school, completely different. But the ball the frisbee floating through the air made it. If you were on the receiving end of that disc, you had to work back towards where it came from, because the disc is floating and it gives defenders time to get in there and break it up. Football, it's the same way. A little bit shorter time scale because the ball's flying way faster and it's not floating at all. But like Kyron Hudson yesterday just didn't even try to work back to the ball. He just turned around, stopped, and what happened? The defender closed in on 3 yards, was able to get a hand in there. And like Drew put it there, but Drew double tapped and he was a half second late, gave the defender that extra half second to get there on time. And like, why are you double tapping? Like, that window's there, read the coverage and just fire it in there. So like maybe that's something he's got to work on before he gets to the NFL, because it's not going to be solved in season. Like that.
It doesn't seem like he trusts himself at all. There's no confidence there.
And I think that's on the coaching staff to like, hey man, don't go throw a pick. Remember that touchdown interception ratio you have? Like that's impeccable.
Right. And that's
don't
the thing.
Go throw the pick. Don't go throw the pick, but like throw it where your guy's gonna catch it.
Don't be afraid to throw the pick, right? Like, yeah, it's all about controlling the football, right? And not turning the ball over, but don't be afraid to make mistakes. It's football. Life is full of it. Like, and I think that's the problem here. Offensively, especially, they're trying to be perfect. Listen, make the perfect cut, make the perfect read, make the perfect throw. You have to play the game. You cannot let that mentality interfere, because when you try to play perfect, you play tight. You don't play loose. You don't have confidence. And that's what we're seeing against teams like Oregon. Like that interception in overtime. That's a ball that he threw that same ball to Khalil Dinkins on the other side of the field against UCLA. And it was and I think it was it might have been Khalil Dinkins. I think it
was Khalil. It was Khalil, but it was a busted coverage for sure.
Right. But he finally hits it. He hits it where it needs to. But again, you have to go out, play with confidence. Right now, you got to play for pride too, because they did not play for pride Saturday. And as a coach, that's what I'm more embarrassed about. You go out there and then you go in the media and listen, they're not always going to be good questions, and there aren't always going to be questions that you want to answer. You play in the Big Ten, you have to cross country. Who gives a shit about travel? Your kids barely go to class because they're all online. Listen, that's not an excuse anymore. You fly charter jets. If you were busing across the country, sure, that's fine. You played a 3 o'clock game or 3:30 game Eastern time. You play at 3:30 every week. Your body clock was fine. It was noon there. Give me a break. It's the Big Ten. Dan Lanning mentioned it. All these coaches, Lincoln Riley. Listen, you don't want to do it, then go back to the way it was. I mean, you're making excuses after excuses after excuses. Be accountable. Listen, I didn't coach them up. They didn't play well, and that's okay too. I said, by no means is it okay to throw players under the bus, but there's accountability on the players level too. They got to hold up their end of the bargain. yeah, maybe that 4th and 2 play, a 4th down was perfect against that, but it was just poorly executed. I don't know that that's accurate, but again, players have to play, coaches have to coach, and make sure these guys are prepared for any situation. Penn State didn't do that, and that's why this loss to UCLA is that much more frustrating. You went in and got, like you said in the first segment, you got outworked, outclassed, outcoached by a Bruins team that has guys that might not even be there after the season.
No, and maybe UCLA goes on a heater now, and maybe this is the springboard that they needed, but 24.5-point favorites. I know Vegas doesn't really mean the world, but you can't go in and lose that game. If you were able to come back, you probably drop down a couple point slots in the rankings, all of the stuff you mentioned, the cross country flights, whatever. Like, you just had a sleepy game. You come out in the next week, but you win, and you come out in the next week and you step on Northwestern's throat, and you go to Kinnick and you step on Iowa's throat, and like kind of all like you put on 2 like statement games. The offense, I think, performed really well. Like, you show like, man, our offense stunk on ice against Oregon. We really turned around to UCLA, and that was our springboard. And now the offense is on a heater, and then the defense is just doing what they do, and it's just there was just so much regression at a time where like they can't afford any of it. And where they go from here, like obviously 3:30 at Northwest, 3:30 at Beaver Stadium for Northwestern this week, and then you got a road trip to Kennett, and then you got another bye. But I don't want to hear the coach. I'm sure there's not coach speak behind closed doors right now, but it better be scorched earth in there of like, and it needs to be accountability all around. Like, I didn't do my job. You didn't, do your job. What are we going to do so that all of us do our job tomorrow? And if your roommate or your position group partner, or your position coach is not doing it, or if your position coach, if one of your players just isn't doing it, step up, have the cojones and say, I'm going to challenge you. You're not working hard enough. And there needs to be that coming together. And you would think that the Oregon loss would have been that coming together. The defense probably got in there at halftime and said, offense, you better step up. Like, we're dying out there. Do your job. And you would hope that there was some of those conversations, but clearly it didn't. It didn't happen. And we might be in for a long road the rest of the season, which stinks because we're 5 games in.
Yeah, honestly, I mean, the good news is, I guess, for Penn State, it can't get much worse moving forward. Maybe a couple more losses, but they shouldn't all be as bad as this one. This is a historically bad loss, first one in 40 years to an AP top 10 team that lost to a team that was 0-4. Again, this is rock bottom for Penn State, and they got to figure out a way to dig themselves out of this hole, and they got to do so rather quickly. We're going to wrap things up here in the third and final segment of the Lasching Out Podcast when we come back from this break on the Nittany Sports Now Network. Welcome back to the third and final segment of the Lasching Out Podcast on the Nittany Sports Now Network. He's Kevin. I'm Jarrod. Kevin, Penn State's got a long way to go. Short time to get there. They are clinging. Their program's future is in the balance. They've got Ohio State looming at the end of this month. Beginning of November. Now that we're into October, it is spooky season, and so far, Penn State has been spooked. To build on some of the Halloween trends, if you will. I guess at least they're not Texas, which is in the same boat. Beginning of the season, everybody thought Texas was the new Alabama. This goes back to our theory that preseason rankings are absolute dog water and dog crap. I think that's fair to say. But there's, again, a lot of football to be left for Penn State, and we'll talk more about Northwestern later this week. Got to have a come to Jesus meeting with yourselves. Look yourselves in the mirror, figure out how you get better, how you make sure something like this doesn't happen again. Because even in the sanction era, there wasn't anything nearly as embarrassing as this. At least there were built-in excuses. Well, we have this, and this, not that, and that. But this, you have your alleged most talented roster, and James Franklin's tenure, and poof, you end up laying an egg, and then it runs, right down your head like it's bird shit, against the Bruins. So now, what else you got, Kevin?
I think if you're Texas, I think you get saved from your embarrassment, because Texas losing to Florida, as bad as they are, is a far better loss.
Yeah, well, it saved Brian Napier's job, or Bill Napier's job.
Yeah, it's a far better loss than Penn State losing on the road at UCLA. I thought Vanderbilt held tough. They came out firing against Alabama, didn't quite get it done. Miami looked strong against Florida State. I really thought Florida State, speaking of a team that needed a bounce back yesterday, I really thought Florida State would come out with something to prove. Miami gets up on them 28-3. They have 19 points in the fourth quarter and just don't quite get it done. But that was one of my picks. Austin Bechtold picked for you this week, by the way. He actually did pretty good. Weird week. Iowa State going into Cincinnati kind of stunk. Cincinnati put 17 on them in the first quarter, never quite recovered. Yeah, it's a weird week in college football. My Virginia Cavaliers, I'm jumping on that bandwagon now. Goes into Louisville as 6.5-point dogs. And goes and gets the win. Back-to-back wins in overtime for the Cavaliers. Other than that, I didn't really get to watch a lot of football this weekend. Kind of a weird week. This is kind of that. Feels like the college football season's been an extra week long the last two seasons, just because of how early in the month of September Labor Day has been. So there's a lot of double buys going on in college football, and it feels like this was the other half of the teams were off last week, and the other half of them are off this week. But yeah, we'll get to Northwestern later this week, but I'm ready to put this weekend behind me.
There's only so much you can do, Kevin. Yeah, and it puts it all in perspective, right? You know, we talk sports all the time, talk. You know, it's very weird. Kevin, before we went on the air, I think Kevin and I were talking about, like, you know, just kind of being able to watch the game. You know, I was, for the first time in 3 weeks now, I will be able to, or 4 weeks, almost a month, really. I'll finally be able to get back into the press box. Hopefully everything goes smooth this week. But get back in the press box on Saturday to watch the game. Last 2 weekends, I was in the hospital. Obviously, my son was born last Sunday. Spent all week, 8 days in the hospital. Watched both the whiteout and this disaster of a game against UCLA. They're blew out from the hospital room, you know, and it puts things in perspective, right? There's so many things that are more important in sport. And yeah, listen, you know, people are talking about firing Franklin, firing this, firing that, doing this, doing that. And listen, sports are sports. Life is life. And I think that's the biggest thing that I think, you know, I can take away from this. I mean, it's just a game. Yeah, it's frustrating. Yeah, you put a lot of time, a lot of money, a lot of heart, blood, soul, whatever thought into cheering for your team, cheering for whatever, and then it comes up and your team lays an egg and does absolutely awful. And you know, that's sports, that's life. You know, it doesn't always go your way, but I will say that it is pretty cool to be able to, you know that my son right now, the Cowboys are 1-0-1 since he was born.
You proud of that? You proud of that, Ty?
Hell yeah. Because there's nothing quite like Dallas Cowboys football, to the point where, as much as they need to suck, they will do just enough to not suck enough to get a good draft pick. Though, who knows? Maybe Drew Aller will put a star in his helmet. I don't know. Only time will tell. But it is damn cool to be a dad. It is damn cool to be able to take care of somebody. It is not as cool as I thought it would be to have shit hit your hand, you know, on the fly. But, you know, somehow, some way, no matter how shitty that was, pun intended, it still wasn't nearly as bad as Penn State's performance against UCLA.
No, probably the only performance this weekend, this will be my parting shot, probably the only performance that could potentially trump Penn State's bad performance was the Arizona Cardinals collapse today.
Oh, yeah.
21-3. Amari DiMercado breaks out a 72-yard run or something like that. And we see this every year. Talk about losing discipline and just lack of pure fundamentals. You know, don't leave the 45-yard line on the kickoff. And if, by God, if you're running into the end zone, do not let go of that football until your foot hits the tape, hits the paint. halfway through the end zone, whether that's the logo or the text or hell, carry it directly to the referee, because that guy dropped it right before the goal line, goes out for a touchback. So it goes from 28-3 potentially to Tennessee Titans ball. They get a touchdown. Then there's the pick that goes to a fumble, which then gets fumbled back into the end zone to go for a touchdown for the Titans, and the Titans end up winning that thing. So was really bad, but at least we didn't lose to Cam Ward and the 0-4 Tennessee Titans in that manner.
There you have it. For Kevin Quigley, this has been Jarrod Prugar on the Lasching Out Podcast. We'll catch you again later this week on the Nittany Sports Now Network as we preview Northwestern, and who knows what to expect from Penn State in that one. Thanks as always for listening.